63-year-old classical pianist, their German Shepherd dog, all of them tonight mysteriously dead. The police right now are ruling out a carbon monoxide leak. This frantic 911 call captured the moment they were found.
February 26th, 2025. The day everything changed. When FBI agents arrived at Gene Hackman's mansion for a routine welfare check, they had no idea what horror awaited them beneath the floors. The body cam footage shows their initial confidence, then confusion, then pure disbelief. What they discovered in that underground chamber wasn't just shocking, it was impossible. A secret that had been buried for decades, hidden in plain sight, protected by one of Hollywood's most beloved legends. The investigation was triggered after several days had passed without any contact from Hackman or his wife, Betsy Arakawa.
This case, they're going to look at every aspect and try to figure out the exact cause. And I think the autopsy is going to be key, and the toxicology. But again, in my experience,
according to initial reports from the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Department, a maintenance worker who regularly serviced the property had raised the alarm. When he arrived for scheduled work and received no response despite repeated attempts to reach the couple, he contacted local authorities. Given Hackman's age and the unusual circumstances of the prolonged silence, deputies were dispatched to conduct a welfare check. What officers discovered upon entering the home was the bodies of Gene Hackman, aged 95, and his wife, Betsy Arakawa. Their dog was also found deceased on the property. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office released a statement confirming the deaths and noting that preliminary assessments suggested the couple had been deceased for several days before being discovered. The statement was careful in its wording, indicating that while foul play was not initially suspected, the circumstances were unusual enough to warrant a thorough investigation. The official cause of death for Gene Hackman was later determined to be hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease listed as a significant contributing factor. His wife's cause of death was reported to be similar in nature. On the surface, these appeared to be natural deaths of an elderly couple, tragic but not unexpected given their ages and health conditions. However, several aspects of the case prompted authorities to look deeper. The estate itself was notable for its level of security and privacy. Set back from public roads and surrounded by dense forest, the property was designed to provide maximum seclusion. Multiple security features had been installed over the years, including reinforced gates, surveillance systems, and motion detection equipment. Staff members who had worked at the property over the years had signed non-disclosure agreements, a practice not uncommon for high-profile individuals seeking to protect their privacy. Hackman, who had largely retired from public life in 2004, had chosen Santa Fe as his home specifically for its distance from the Hollywood spotlight. The property featured extensive grounds and a main residence that housed Hackman's considerable art collection and personal library. Those who had visited the estate described it as beautifully appointed, with period furniture and artwork that reflected Hackman's interests in history and culture. The actor had always been known as intensely private, preferring to keep his personal life separate from his professional achievements. This desire for privacy, while notable, was not in itself unusual for someone of his stature and generation. What changed the nature of the investigation was a discovery made during the initial search of the property. According to documents that would later be released following a court ruling on public access, investigators found evidence of a concealed space within the residence. The search warrant affidavit, portions of which were made available to the press, indicated that agents had located what appeared to be a hidden passageway or tunnel system beneath the main structure. This discovery was reportedly made when investigators were conducting a thorough examination of the residence as part of their standard protocol for unexplained deaths. The concealed entrance was found in an area that various sources have described as being in or near the library section of the home. The construction appeared to be considerably older than the main residence, with some preliminary assessments suggesting it could date back several decades or possibly longer. The existence of such a feature immediately raised questions. Underground spaces in residential properties are not unheard of, particularly in areas like New Mexico, where wine cellars, root cellars, and storage spaces have historical precedent. However, the apparent age and construction method of this particular tunnel suggested something beyond typical residential use. The materials used in its construction and the way it had been concealed indicated a level of effort and planning that seemed disproportionate to simple storage needs. Local authorities requested assistance from federal investigators given the unusual nature of the findings and the need for specialized resources to properly examine and document the underground space. The FBI became involved in the investigation, bringing in forensic teams and specialists to assess what had been discovered. According to statements from officials, the examination of these areas was conducted with extreme care due to potential structural concerns and the unknown nature of what might be found. News of the investigation began to spread through local media outlets in Santa Fe before gaining national attention. ABC News was among the first major networks to report on the search warrant and the unusual circumstances surrounding the deaths. The combination of a Hollywood legend, mysterious deaths, and the discovery of hidden spaces created intense public interest. However, authorities remained tight-lipped about specific details, citing the ongoing nature of the investigation and the need to protect the integrity of their work. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office held a press conference in the days following the discovery, during which officials emphasized that they were treating the deaths as suspicious purely from an investigative standpoint, meaning they were taking every precaution to ensure nothing was overlooked. This is standard procedure in cases where circumstances are unclear or unusual elements are present. The spokesperson stressed that there was no evidence of violence or forced entry into the home, and that the investigation was proceeding methodically. Body camera footage from the initial police response was eventually released, showing officers arriving at the property and making contact with the maintenance worker who had called them. The footage, while limited in scope due to privacy considerations and investigative concerns, showed the exterior of the residence and the careful approach taken by responding officers. The video confirmed the timeline of events and provided visual documentation of the initial response, though it did not show the interior of the home or any of the subsequent discoveries. As news organizations began reporting on the case, various details emerged about the property's history and Hackman's life in Santa Fe. The actor had purchased the estate years earlier and had made it his primary residence following his retirement from acting. He was known in the local community as someone who valued his privacy but was generally cordial when encountered in public. Neighbors described the couple as quiet and unobtrusive, rarely hosting large gatherings and maintaining a low profile consistent with Hackman's desire to live away from public attention. The question that began to emerge, both in investigative circles and in public discourse, was whether there was any connection between the underground spaces and the deaths of the couple. While official statements maintained that the deaths appeared to be from natural causes, the timing of the discovery and the unusual nature of what had been found created speculation. Investigators emphasized that they were examining all aspects of the property and the circumstances surrounding the deaths, leaving no stone unturned in their effort to understand what had happened. Understanding the full context of what investigators discovered requires a closer look at the property itself and how it came to be examined so thoroughly. The Hackman estate was not simply a luxury home. It represented decades of careful planning, modification, and a clear intention to create a space that was both impressive and remarkably private. The property was situated on a significant plot of land in one of Santa Fe's more secluded areas. The region itself is known for attracting individuals seeking privacy, with many celebrities and public figures choosing the area precisely because of its distance from major media centers and its respect for personal boundaries. Santa Fe has long been home to artists, writers, and actors who value the combination of natural beauty and cultural richness without the constant scrutiny that comes with living in places like Los Angeles or New York. Hackman's estate took this desire for privacy to another level. The perimeter of the property featured substantial barriers designed to discourage casual visitors and maintain separation from neighboring properties. Stone walls, some sections reaching considerable heights, marked the boundaries. The main entrance was secured by reinforced steel gates that could only be opened by authorized individuals. These were not decorative features, but functional security measures that sent a clear message about the level of privacy the residents expected. Beyond these physical barriers, the property was equipped with modern security technology. Surveillance cameras were positioned at strategic points around the grounds, providing coverage of entry points and key areas. Motion sensors were installed along pathways and in areas where unauthorized access might be attempted. Some reports from former contractors who had worked on various aspects of the property over the years mentioned thermal, imaging equipment, and other advanced monitoring systems, though the full extent of the security infrastructure was never publicly detailed. The employment of security personnel and maintenance staff followed strict protocols. According to individuals who had knowledge of the property's operations, anyone who worked there, whether for a single day or for years, was required to sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. These legal documents prevented employees from discussing what they saw, heard, or learned while on the property. Violations could result in significant legal consequences. While such agreements are common among high-profile individuals, those who had seen the Hackman Estate's NDAs noted they were particularly detailed and restrictive. The main residence itself was described by the few who had been inside as extraordinary. The architectural style blended traditional southwestern elements with more contemporary features, creating spaces that were both comfortable and striking. The interior featured high ceilings, natural light flooding through strategically placed windows, and materials that reflected the local environment while maintaining an atmosphere of elegance. Hackman was known to be a collector, and his home reflected these interests. The walls reportedly displayed original artworks from recognized painters, pieces that had been acquired over years of collecting. Some of these works dated back centuries, acquired from galleries, private sales, and estate auctions across Europe and the United States. The furniture throughout the home included antique pieces, some with documented histories tracing back to European aristocratic families. These were not reproductions but authentic items that had survived generations. The library, which would later become central to the investigation, housed an extensive collection of books. Hackman had always been known as an avid reader, and his personal library reflected wide-ranging interests in history, literature, and various academic subjects. First editions, rare volumes, and carefully maintained texts filled custom-built shelving. For someone who had spent much of his life interpreting written words through performance, the library represented a personal sanctuary where he could engage with material on his own terms. The grounds surrounding the home were equally impressive. Professional horticulturists were employed to maintain gardens that featured both native plants adapted to the New Mexico climate and more exotic specimens that required special care. Water features, stone pathways, and carefully designed outdoor spaces created areas for contemplation and enjoyment of the natural setting. The level of maintenance required to keep everything in pristine condition represented a significant ongoing investment. It was during routine renovation work that the initial discovery was made. According to accounts from the construction company involved, they had been contracted to perform updates to certain areas of the residence. The exact nature of the renovation project has been described variously as modernization work, structural improvements, or upgrades to building systems. What is clear is that the work required accessing areas of the home that had not been disturbed in some time. Workers reportedly noticed irregularities in one section of the structure. The specifics of what first drew their attention remain somewhat unclear, but construction professionals are trained to recognize when something does not match standard building practices. They may have noticed differences in wall thickness, unusual acoustic properties when tapping on surfaces, or inconsistencies in the way certain architectural elements connected. Whatever the initial clue, it prompted closer examination. When the construction team investigated further, they found what appeared to be a concealed entrance. This was not a simple hidden door or storage space, but something more substantial. The way it had been incorporated into the structure suggested it had been there for a considerable time, possibly predating recent renovations by many years. The construction techniques and materials used did not match those of the main residence, indicating this feature came from a different era of construction. The discovery was reported to the property management team, and given its unusual nature, the decision was made to investigate more thoroughly. This was when the full extent of what lay beneath the property began to become apparent. The concealed entrance led to what appeared to be a tunnel or passageway, constructed with materials and methods that suggested significant age. The reinforcement of the walls indicated whoever built this had intended it to last, using construction techniques that exceeded what would typically be necessary for a simple basement or storage area. The dating of this underground construction became a point of interest for investigators. Preliminary assessments suggested it could be several decades old, possibly extending back half a century or more. Some experts who examined photographic evidence and construction details suggested it might be even older, potentially dating to the early 20th century or late 19th century. This raised immediate questions about the property's history and what purpose such a structure might have served. New Mexico has a complex history of settlement, development, and various uses of land over the centuries. The region saw Spanish colonial activity, Native American presence spanning thousands of years, American territorial expansion, and more recent development. During certain periods, underground spaces were constructed for various legitimate purposes, including storage of goods, protection from extreme weather, or concealment during times of conflict. Some historical structures from the Cold War era included fallout shelters or protected spaces built during times of heightened concern about nuclear threats. However, the construction of the tunnel beneath the Hackman estate did not clearly fit any of these typical categories. Its design and the effort that went into its creation suggested a specific purpose that remained unclear. The entrance had been so carefully concealed that it had gone unnoticed for years, possibly decades, despite various renovations and inspections of the property. This level of concealment implied that whoever created it wanted to ensure it would not be casually discovered. When authorities became involved following the deaths of Gene and Betsy Hackman, the existence of this underground feature took on new significance. While there was no immediate evidence connecting it to the deaths themselves, investigators could not ignore such an unusual element when trying to understand the full circumstances. The Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office, in their statements about the case, acknowledged that the discovery of previously unknown spaces within the residence contributed to their decision to conduct a comprehensive investigation rather than simply accepting the initial assessment of natural causes. The question of what Gene Hackman knew about this tunnel and when he learned of its existence became central to understanding the case. Had he been aware of it when he purchased the property? Had he discovered it later and chosen to keep it concealed? Or was this revelation during the renovation as much a surprise to him as it was to the workers who found it? These questions remained unanswered as investigators worked to piece together the timeline of events and the history of the property itself. When federal investigators began their detailed examination of the Hackman residence, they approached the task with the methodical care that characterizes major investigations. The presence of the concealed passageway meant that a simple inspection would not suffice. Specialized personnel were brought in, including structural engineers to assess safety, forensic specialists to document findings, and agents trained in handling potential evidence in unusual environments. The entry point to the underground space was located in an area that multiple sources have described as being associated with the library section of the home. The exact mechanism of concealment has not been publicly detailed, but investigators reportedly needed specific knowledge of where to look to locate the entrance. This suggests a level of sophistication in the design that went beyond simply hiding a door behind furniture or artwork. The concealment appeared to be architectural, built into the structure itself in a way that would not be apparent even to someone carefully examining the room. Once the entrance was located and determined to be safe to access, investigators proceeded downward. The passageway consisted of stone steps leading into darkness. The construction was solid, showing little deterioration despite apparent age. The stones used in the facades construction were fitted together with precision, suggesting skilled craftsmanship rather than hasty or amateur work. The temperature dropped noticeably as investigators descended, a common feature of underground spaces where the Earth's insulation creates a different climate from the surface. The air quality in the space was monitored carefully before investigators proceeded further. Underground areas that have been sealed for long periods can develop dangerous atmospheric conditions, including reduced oxygen levels or the accumulation of harmful gases. Once the space was deemed safe for entry, documentation began. Investigators used high-powered lighting equipment and cameras to record everything they encountered, creating a comprehensive visual record of the space before anything was disturbed. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber, a space that appeared to have been used for storage at some point in its history. The dimensions suggested careful planning in its construction. This was not a small hidden room, but a substantial underground area capable of housing significant amounts of material. The walls showed the same careful stonework as the entrance passage, and there were signs that the space had been reinforced at various points, perhaps as concerns about structural integrity arose over the years. What drew immediate attention were the contents of the chamber. Wooden crates and boxes of various sizes were stacked along the walls and arranged throughout the space. Many showed obvious signs of age, with wood that had darkened and warped over time. Some containers had deteriorated to the point where their contents were partially visible or had spilled onto the floor. The sheer volume of material present indicated this space had been actively used for storage over an extended period. Investigators began the careful process of examining these containers. Each one needed to be photographed in place, catalogued, and then opened with caution due to the age of the materials and uncertainty about contents. Inside the containers were various items that appeared to date from different time periods. Paper documents, many yellowed and fragile with age, were found in several boxes. These included what appeared to be correspondence, records, and various written materials that would require expert analysis to fully understand and authenticate. Photographs were discovered among the materials, preserved to varying degrees depending on how they had been stored. Some were in relatively good condition, protected by their containers from humidity and light. Others had suffered damage over time, with fading, discoloration, or physical deterioration, making them difficult to examine. The photographs depicted various subjects, including individuals whose identities were not immediately apparent, locations that would require research to identify, and scenes that provided little context without additional information. The photographic styles and techniques visible in these images suggested they came from different eras. Some appeared to use older photographic processes that were common in the early to mid-20th century. Others seemed more recent but still predated digital photography. The variety suggested these materials had been accumulated over a considerable span of time rather than all originating from a single period. Among the papers were what investigators described as record-keeping documents. These included handwritten notes, typed pages, and various forms of documentation whose purpose was not immediately clear. Some appeared to be organizational records or meeting minutes. Others contained technical information or descriptions that would require subject matter experts to interpret. The condition of these papers varied, with some remaining legible and others damaged to the point where only fragments could be read. The walls of the chamber itself bore markings that investigators documented extensively. These included various symbols and designs that had been carved, painted, or otherwise applied to the stone surfaces. The meanings of these markings were not self-evident. Some resembled geometric patterns or diagrams. Others appeared more decorative or symbolic in nature. Whether these markings served a functional purpose, held specific meaning to those who created them, or were simply decorative elements remained unclear. Investigators also found objects that appeared to be tools or implements of various kinds. These metallic items showed significant corrosion and wear, making it difficult to determine their original purpose or function in some cases. Some appeared to be standard tools that would have been common in certain trades or professions during the era when they were likely manufactured. Others had features or designs that were less immediately recognizable, requiring consultation with experts in historical tools and equipment. The flooring of the chamber showed patterns of wear and marking that suggested the space had seen regular use at some point. There were areas where the stone floor showed more weathering, indicating paths that had been frequently traveled. Other sections appeared less disturbed, possibly serving as storage areas that were accessed less often. These wear patterns could potentially help investigators understand how the space had been utilized, though interpretation would require careful analysis. As investigators worked through the chamber, cataloging and documenting everything they found, they encountered an additional feature that had been obscured by the stored materials and the darkness of the space. Set into one wall was what appeared to be a doorway, though it was unlike the entrance through which they had come. This was constructed of heavy iron or steel, darkened with age and corrosion. The surface showed significant oxidation, and the metal had clearly not been maintained or treated for preservation. The door had no visible handle or obvious means of opening from the outside. Instead, there was a locking mechanism of some kind, heavily corroded and appearing to be quite old based on its design and construction. The door fit tightly into its frame, and there were no gaps or spaces that would allow investigators to see what lay beyond. The substantial construction and the presence of a lock suggested this was intended to secure something, though whether that was for protection from outside intrusion or to contain something within remained unknown. The discovery of this door presented investigators with a decision. Opening it would require specialized equipment given the apparent age and condition of the lock. There were also safety concerns about what might lie beyond, including potential structural hazards, environmental conditions, or other unknown factors. The decision on how to proceed would need to be made carefully, weighing the investigative value of accessing the space beyond against the risks and the potential for damaging what might be important historical or evidentiary material. Representatives from the FBI, who were asked about this aspect of the investigation, declined to provide specific details, citing the ongoing nature of the case and the need to protect investigative methods and findings. This silence, while understandable from a law enforcement perspective, left many questions unanswered about what, if anything, lay beyond that locked door and what its presence might mean in the larger context of the case. The underground chamber and its contents represented a significant puzzle for investigators. The age of the materials, the apparent care with which they had been stored, and the effort that had gone into creating and concealing this space all suggested some level of importance. However, determining what that importance was, who had created this repository, and what connection, if any, it had to Gene Hackman or the circumstances of the deaths would require extensive investigation and analysis. Forensic experts began the process of carefully removing select items for detailed examination in controlled laboratory conditions. Each item would need to be preserved, analyzed for any trace evidence it might contain, and evaluated for its potential relevance to understanding the property's history and the recent events. This process would take considerable time as the volume of material was substantial and the age of many items required specialized handling and analysis techniques. The discovery of the underground spaces beneath the Hackman estate naturally led to extensive speculation about their origin and purpose. When news of the investigation became public, various theories began to circulate among those following the case, ranging from plausible historical explanations to more elaborate scenarios. Understanding these different perspectives requires examining what was known about the property's history and the broader context of the region. One line of inquiry focused on the possibility that the tunnel system dated to an earlier era of the property's existence. New Mexico has a complex history of land use, and properties in the region sometimes contain features from previous owners or earlier periods of development. During the mid-20th century, particularly during the Cold War era of the 1950s and 1960s, some property owners constructed underground shelters or bunkers as protection against potential nuclear threats. These structures varied widely in size and sophistication, from simple reinforced basements to elaborate underground facilities designed for extended occupation. The characteristics of Cold War-era shelters typically included ventilation systems, water storage, and spaces designed for human habitation over extended periods. They were often stocked with preserved food, medical supplies, and communication equipment. The construction methods of that era favored concrete reinforcement and steel doors, designed to provide protection from radiation and blast effects. Whether the tunnel beneath the Hackman estate matched these characteristics or represented something from a different time period was part of what investigators needed to determine through careful analysis of construction techniques and materials. Investigators looking into the property's historical records attempted to trace its ownership back through previous decades. Land records, tax documents, and other archival materials were examined to establish a timeline of who had owned the property and when various structures might have been built. This type of research is often complicated by gaps in historical documentation, changes in record-keeping practices over time, and the private nature of residential property transactions. What emerged was a picture of the property passing through several hands over the course of the 20th century, though detailed information about modifications made by previous owners proved difficult to obtain. The challenge of historical property research is compounded when dealing with wealthy or influential previous owners who may have had both the resources and the motivation to keep certain activities private. Building permits and inspection records, which might normally provide insight into construction projects, are not always comprehensive, particularly for work done many decades ago. Underground construction, in particular, might have been completed without full documentation, especially if it predated modern building code enforcement or if property owners had reasons for maintaining discretion. Some researchers noted that the Santa Fe area, like many parts of the American Southwest, has a history that includes various groups and organizations operating with different levels of secrecy over the years. During different periods, the region attracted individuals seeking privacy for various reasons, some entirely legitimate and others more questionable. Without concrete evidence linking the tunnel to any specific group or purpose, however, such observations remained speculative rather than explanatory. The timing of the tunnel's discovery in relation to the deaths of Gene and Betsy Hackman prompted questions about possible connections between these events. From a strictly factual standpoint, the renovation work that led to the discovery of the concealed passageway occurred before the couple's deaths, though the exact timeline and whether Hackman was informed about the discovery remained unclear. Investigators had to consider whether knowledge of the tunnel's existence or concerns about its discovery becoming public might have contributed to stress or other factors affecting the elderly couple. Medical examiners who reviewed the case noted that the official causes of death were consistent with the ages and known health conditions of both individuals. Cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease are unfortunately common afflictions among elderly populations, and the combination of these conditions could certainly account for the deaths without requiring any external factors. However, the unusual circumstances surrounding the case meant that investigators could not simply accept these findings without ensuring no other factors were involved. The thoroughness of the investigation reflected standard procedure when any unusual elements are present, regardless of how likely they are to be relevant to the ultimate cause of death. Accounts from neighbors and others in the local community added additional layers to the understanding of the case, though many of these accounts were difficult to verify. Some individuals who lived in proximity to the estate reported that they had occasionally noticed unusual activity on the property over the years. These observations were typically vague, mentioning vehicles arriving at odd hours or brief periods of increased activity that seemed out of character with the generally quiet nature of the residence. The nature of such neighbor accounts requires careful evaluation. People's memories can be unreliable, particularly when recalling events from years past. The knowledge that something unusual has been discovered can also color recollections, leading individuals to reinterpret ordinary events through a new lens of suspicion or significance. Investigators had to weigh such testimony carefully, determining what might represent genuinely unusual activity and what simply reflected normal variations in the life of a private household. Former staff members and contractors who had worked on the property at various times were sought out by journalists and, in some cases, by investigators. Those willing to speak publicly were constrained by the non-disclosure agreements they had signed, which limited what they could legally discuss. Some provided general impressions of the property and its owners without divulging specific details, describing Hackman as private but professional in his dealings with service providers. Others declined to comment at all, citing their legal obligations or simply preferring not to be involved in the public discussion of the case. There were also accounts, more difficult to substantiate, of individuals who had worked at the property in earlier periods and had subsequently left the area or could not be located. Whether these departures were unusual or simply reflected normal employment turnover and people moving on with their lives was hard to determine. In any large property with staff employed over many years, it would not be uncommon for some former employees to relocate or lose touch with their previous employers and colleagues. The challenge for investigators was distinguishing between ordinary employment patterns and anything that might suggest deliberate disappearances or efforts to conceal information. Local historians with knowledge of Santa Fe's past attempted to place the property in its broader historical context. They examined old maps, newspaper archives, and other historical documents to understand what might have existed on or near the site in previous eras. This research revealed that the area had seen various uses over the past century and a half, but nothing that clearly explained the presence of the elaborate underground construction that had been discovered. Some attention was paid to Gene Hackman's career and the roles he had portrayed throughout his long time in Hollywood. His filmography included numerous characters involved in conspiracies, government operations, and hidden truths. Films like The Conversation, in which he played a surveillance expert, and Enemy of the State, which dealt with government monitoring and privacy invasion, led some observers to note the ironic parallel between his fictional work and the mysterious circumstances surrounding his death and property. However, drawing conclusions from an actor's choice of roles is highly speculative, as performers typically have limited control over the scripts they are offered and the characters they portray. The ongoing nature of the investigation meant that federal authorities remained cautious in their public statements. Representatives from both the FBI and the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office emphasized that the examination of evidence was continuing and that they could not comment on specific findings or theories while the investigation remained active. This official reticence, while entirely appropriate from a law enforcement perspective, contributed to the sense of mystery surrounding the case. Forensic analysis of materials recovered from the underground chamber was continuing in various laboratories. Documents were being examined by experts in historical papers and archival materials to determine their age, origin, and content. The photographs were being analysed to identify when and where they were taken, and whether the individuals depicted could be identified through comparison with historical records. Physical objects were undergoing examination to determine their purpose, origin, and whether they bore any trace evidence that might be relevant to the investigation. Advanced forensic techniques were being employed, including methods for detecting residues or traces that might not be visible to the naked eye. DNA analysis was being conducted on materials where appropriate. Though the age of many items meant that biological material might be too degraded to yield useful results, attempts were being made to decipher any text or symbols found in the chamber, with linguists and experts in various writing systems consulted to determine if the markings carried specific meanings. The question of what lay beyond the locked iron door remained unanswered in public discourse, as authorities had not released information about whether that barrier had been opened or what, if anything, had been found beyond it. The existence of this unopened door became a focal point for speculation, with various theories proposed about what it might conceal. Without official confirmation of what investigators had or had not discovered, such speculation remained entirely theoretical. As months passed since the initial discovery, the case remained open and active. Periodic updates from authorities confirmed that work was continuing, but specific details about findings or conclusions were not released. This is typical of complex investigations, particularly those involving historical materials and questions that cannot be answered quickly. The process of properly analysing and understanding decades-old materials requires time and expertise that cannot be rushed. The broader questions raised by the case extended beyond the specific circumstances of the Hackman estate. The discovery prompted discussions about what might exist beneath other properties, particularly older estates or properties with complex histories. It raised questions about how thoroughly properties are examined during sales and transfers, and what obligations exist to disclose unusual features or historical elements that might not be immediately apparent. For those interested in the case, whether from a true crime perspective, historical interest, or simple curiosity, the lack of definitive answers proved frustrating. The gap between what investigators knew and what they were willing or able to share publicly meant that many questions remained unresolved. Whether those questions would eventually be answered through official reports, court proceedings, or other means remained to be seen. The intersection of a Hollywood legend's death with mysterious underground tunnels and unexplained artifacts created a story that captured public attention precisely because it defied easy explanation. Gene Hackman had lived a life largely out of the public eye after his retirement, and the circumstances surrounding the end of that life brought him back into public discourse in a way he had spent years trying to avoid. Whether the truth of what existed beneath his estate would prove mundane or remarkable, the case served as a reminder that even in an age of pervasive information and surveillance, significant mysteries can still exist, waiting to be uncovered in unexpected places.